Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the session, Turning the Tables, Sustainable Solutions and Strategies for Restaurant Operations. My name is Angel Veza. I'm on the Capital Innovation and Engagement team at ReFed. But actually, before joining ReFed, I used to be a chef. I worked in lots of restaurants in New York City, very specifically fine dining, and as you all know, which is why you're in this room, we wasted a lot of food. And so I went on this whole journey to try and reduce food waste, and so this panel in particular in this session is very near and dear to my heart. But today, I get to work on the ReFed Catalytic Grant Fund. Now at ReFed, we talk a lot about catalytic capital, and what we're talking about is capital that's patient, flexible, and risk-tolerant to unlock additional capital and additional impact. And that's what the Catalytic Grant Fund is designed to do. And so we've been able to deploy funding through a series of open calls that are centered around thematic food waste themes, where we know grant funding and innovation is most needed. And that's what led us to our most recent open call focused on restaurant solutions. And with the support of Toast.org, we were able to launch last year. And also to really amplify that catalytic nature of the funding, we're able to provide a subset of grantees the opportunity to pilot their solutions with restaurants, especially Toast customers, which we're very excited about. Now, to take a step back again, I worked in fine dining, so I kind of understood some of the barriers and challenges that restaurants were facing, but we wanted to make sure that the solutions we were funding really were going to actually be adopted by restaurants. So we decided to do a set of interviews with all types of restaurants, full service, fast casual, quick service, to try and get at the root causes of waste and what the barriers and challenges are to implement food waste solutions. So I want to share some of those insights with you today before we get started. So let's start with full-service restaurants. Actually, Secretary Vilsack kind of talked about these large portion sizes, and you're going to see that a lot specifically in full-service restaurants. And so the main driver of waste is plate waste, specifically. Now, I will say the exception to that is in fine dining restaurants. So this is actually a picture of me with chef, and we're actually plating very specifically what we want on the plate, and everything is measured, right? We're actually weighing out the protein. We have specific cuts for the vegetables. And while it's a beautiful plating, what ends up happening is there's a ton of trim and byproduct. We had a lot of citrus trim, actually, and one of the panelists will talk about some creative ways to address that, but that was a main driver of waste. The other piece, too, is excess inventory, very specifically bread. If you've ever gone to a fine dining restaurant, you always get bread service, right? But imagine if you show up and you don't get bread service, but all the other guests do, and this is what it ends up looking like in the back of house. Tons and tons of bread. Every time I did inventory, this was always what we had the most of. So in fine dining, it's not plate waste, it's really the byproduct and trim and excess inventory. Now again, fast casual and quick service restaurants are different too. You're not gonna see a lot of plate waste in those types of restaurant settings. What you will see though is a lot of overproduction. There's a ton of overproduction, and especially when you have certain ingredients, you want to make sure you don't run out, but there might be a lot of leftover at the end of the day. So you'll see a lot of overproduction in fast casual and quick service restaurants. Now then we talk to the restaurants, okay, what is a barrier to implementing a food waste solution? And one of the things was spacing. There is not a lot of space in restaurants. You cannot ask them to hold food until it can be picked up. They literally do not have the space to do it. Labor and logistics. I worked in one restaurant where we could do up to 500 guests just for dinner service and 200 guests for lunch service. So we get really busy and it gets really chaotic. So you don't have a lot of time to work with other solution providers and figure out how to run a food donation program or a composting program. And cost. That's the big one. The restaurant industry has really slim profit margins. These guys could probably give you more accurate numbers, but on average, full service, you're looking at 3 to 5%, and then for fast casual and quick service, 6 to 9%. And so then we were like, okay, we understand what's kind of happening with the waste and what these barriers are, so we decided to design the open call to look for solutions that were really simple, affordable, and convenient, and also maybe had a business case for these restaurants. And we also wanted to make sure that they didn't just work for the big chains, that they could work for independent restaurants too. So we launched the open call, and we got a lot of insights from the 100 applications that we got. When we were looking at food rescue, which is probably the bulk of the applications, admittedly a lot of the models were still too traditional. It's too hard to actually implement it due to some of those barriers like spacing and logistics. And the other thing we saw too is policy was driving a lot of the applications. We got a lot of applications from California specifically because of SB 1383, where now businesses, the tier 2 businesses, which include restaurants, have to be in compliance with the law. Last but not least, we also had composting solutions, but again, still a little too traditional. Right now we have to buy new bins. We have to have space for the bins. The staff has to source separate, and then you gotta put in another set of bins, and you have to pay a hauling fee. There wasn't too much change there. The only change we really saw were these on-site solutions, which were already addressing some barriers like convenience, but there wasn't a solution for the output. What is a restaurant supposed to do with the digest date or the soil amendment? That was still a barrier for these types of solutions. In terms of prevention, we saw a lot of enhanced demanding solutions that were tech-enabled, as well as shelf life extension. There are some other solutions out there, particularly around like appliances that can automate a lot of things, and that does help reduce labor costs as well as food waste, but they're very cost prohibitive at this stage. So we learned a lot from the open call, and we were able to find 6 grantees that we felt really fit what we were looking to achieve. I'm not going to tell you what they do because they're here today, so my call to action for you is to go find them, learn about what they do. They're fantastic, 3 of them presenting during the solution showcase later today, so don't miss out. But the big point of all of this is, yes, there's still challenges, there's still barriers, but these panelists today are going to tell you about some great things they're actually doing in restaurants right now to alleviate a lot of these barriers. I'm going to share those insights with you today. And with that, I'd like to welcome Jeff. Thank you, Jeff, so much.
Thank you. Nice job. So I'm Jeff Clark with the National Restaurant Association. Somehow I've been there 11 years. It's amazing how fast the time goes by, and I'm super excited to be moderating this panel today. Before we start, can everyone please silence their phones? 2, it is being recorded, so we wanted to open this up to the group to ask questions, engage with our speakers, and we ask that you go to the mic if you need to line up. That's fine too. That'll be great. And then, of course, right after this is lunch, so if you have any burning questions at noon, you can always approach any of the speakers, and we can chat about it in a little bit. So who here, before we start, has worked in a restaurant? Show of hands. Okay. And keep your hand up if you felt it was a calm, tranquil, sort of just loving space. No, of course not. It was crazy, chaotic, and everyone's running around with a mad dash and urgency behind them. So part of what I want to cover today and with the panelists is not only what they're doing to reduce food waste, but also think about how all of you can engage restaurateurs in this crazy, manic, active, fun, amazing, adorable business practice that we call restaurants. So here on the bench today, Anish will come up, present, and then we'll sit down and have a few questions, and then open it up to the audience for questions. We have Boyo, who's a tech innovator with 7 years at the point-of-sale company Toast, and he currently leads the product development division Toast.org, which is the philanthropic arm of the Toast Company. And his team's mission is to empower restaurants to be the change makers in their local communities. Next, we have Dawn Rhodes, who is a waste diversion maven with 15 years at the Chick-fil-A company. She leads food waste reduction efforts there, and she partners with the franchisees and owners of Chick-fil-A locations on the local level to minimize waste generation, donate surplus food to their community partners, and divert organic waste to landfill. And finally, Mike Capoferri is a 23-year hospitality veteran with extensive work experience in Atlanta, Los Angeles, and New York City, big restaurant towns. He's the owner-operator of the highly acclaimed Thunderbolt, a Los Angeles neighborhood cocktail bar that utilizes cutting-edge technology to deliver delicious, approachable, and more sustainable cocktails at an extremely efficient pace. Very good to reduce labor costs and increase service pace. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Annie and let him come to what he's doing at the Toast Company.
Hey everyone, my name is Annie, and for those who don't know, Toast is the point of sale for restaurants. We try to be the all-in-one for restaurants, including payroll, online ordering, on-prem. We power over 112,000 restaurants, and so I'm very grateful to be part of this conversation to bring the perspective of all that data to this conversation. And so my team, as Jeff had mentioned, is the product arm of Toast.org. We have our classical philanthropic arm where we make grants, our people, we engage our people to volunteer, and also on this product side, building products right into the point of sale that helps restaurants be change makers. And that's what our mission, that's what we're in service of. But for the purposes of this conversation, I'm obviously going to start with food waste. So how did we get here? 2 years ago, we decided we wanted to make a systemic impact in our space. It was quite clear that food waste was a notable challenge that restaurants were experiencing, and we just set out to better understand the landscape and where we, Toast, had the ability to participate and where we had almost an implicit permission to help out. And so we set out to understand two big things. And I'm going to summarize what was a year-plus journey in a couple slides, so bear with me if it feels concise. We wanted to learn how restaurants were managing their food waste today and how Toast was best positioned to help. So what did we learn when we spoke to hundreds of restaurants? And again, just a reminder that the scale of what we're playing with is quite large, 112,000 restaurants. We get a lot of feedback, both gentle feedback and quite direct feedback when we're not doing stuff really well. As everyone can attest, here restaurant owners are so passionate, and I do think that the show The Bear does it a little bit of justice. But we love that. That's why we're in this space, because we know restaurants are the cornerstones of our community. So there's no place where I would rather be. So what did we learn? We learned that our restaurants are actively managing, they claim and state that they're actively managing their waste. They're aware of how to refine their operations. There's this implicit sense of pride that chefs have that they are not wasting anything, which in some cases might be true. In other cases, I think pride and just this time that requires to do this stuff just might be barriers to entry. The second thing we learned, and I think a lot of people have felt this, there's a healthy misconception about donations, which was just so novel to me. And I think the idea behind liabilities really has scared some restaurant operators in just this kind of putting aside the idea that donations aren't an option. And clearly with the Samaritan Act and the enhanced protections around donations, that is not the case. And so we have a responsibility to debunk this myth. On the third is that most restaurants, mom and pops, small operations, can't afford these massive and expensive waste management solutions, and oftentimes are shut out from that experience. And so we knew that we had to build something that was right in their vernacular and mental model. And in as much as we love regulations, when we spoke to a lot of the restaurants, it didn't feel as if they were very worried about them. And primarily some said, I'll believe it when I see it, because they just didn't think that their enforcements were coming. And so another reason how we learned to kind of speak this language and potentially not lead forward with regulations. And you'll see why. It's cost and savings. And so our language started to change. So where is Toast, this big software company, best positioned to help? Again, we kind of think of ourselves as the operating system of a restaurant. We want restaurant operators to do the thing that they love, which is delighting their guests. We just want to power that and take care of the harder kind of connection points of running a restaurant operation. So for us, what we learned was data entry was the best place to start. People just needed to know what food waste was occurring in their systems and their operations. Then they'll be able to figure out the plan from there. Any solution that we were supposed to present should be just about the same cost or just less work than what was already existing they were doing today in their operations. And we kind of found that bakeries were kind of getting a head start on this. They were using our POS in this very hacky way to start tracking food waste. So we kind of hung on to them as an opportunity there, that there might be actually a cleaner product market fit for us as we thought about the larger, more fine dining casual. So we ended up with this customer problem, and I think this has been the prompt that has guided us for the last 2 years. And I'm going to read it out just because every single time I think of why we're on this journey, and not to lose sight of what's the most important, is that for me as a restaurant owner, I need to manage my restaurant's food waste, both to avoid fines and reduce my operating costs. But I just don't have the keyword time or the know-how on how to invest in management strategies. And the general theme is, I'm sure there's money here, I just don't know what it is, I just don't have the time, come back later. We're like, okay, cool. I've been sleeping and thinking about this problem for the last 2 years, so we keyed in on that. And so we set out to build this suite of product features that eliminates the mystery around food waste for restaurants by giving them the opportunity to track their food waste right on the point of sale system, get the insights, and also just give them a little bit of more visibility into the cost of goods sold. I was actually telling my panelists here that I wanted to bring this physical demo, but I realized I just didn't want to check my bag on the flight here with these point of sales. So you can think of our point of sales are they're clean, they're sleek, but they are heavy. So the food waste trackers you can kind of see from this image here is built right on the point of sale system. And this is the biggest part of their experience. We did not want to add an additional mental model to an operator's a staff. And so the difference between what we've built here and what's generally how they use it is that you tag an item and then you credit card process. But the waste tracker does all of that without the last portion of paying for your meal. So I don't know if you've ever seen these staff, and I'm sure Mike has the staff where they close their eyes in there, and they're just pressing all the buttons and they just make your order. We wanted it to be that magical as well. So the operator can pick the waste reason that they want, and then they can add it to the items. And at the end of the day, they're able to track this on the go. Again, these portable devices that we have, they get the analytics for that. So you can think of the what they're wasting, when they're wasting, and how they're wasting it, all built natively into the point of sale system. We also paired them with this educational hub, so now you know what you're wasting. What do I do with this information? We gave them information on where to donate, enhanced tax deduction, all this information that kind of is this companion with that work. And just in 2023, just to quickly wrap this up, this was the first 3 months or so of the full year 2023. We saw about $5 million in retail value logged by a handful of restaurants, 1,700. I can say today that multiply that number by a lot, and that's what we're seeing, which is very scary, but very exciting nonetheless. The major food waste reason that we keep on seeing logged is expired. And one of our biggest users of this was Paris Baguette, 160 locations. They love it. They can see it at this aggregate level of how to reduce cost across their locations. But where do we go from here? We want to get more people using this. And we also want to start thinking about, I think it's the more exciting part, the diversion. And that's why I'm really excited to be in this room with all of you about how to help restaurants continue to divert their excess food, either through resale, compost, donations. There's a lot of magic here, and I'm very grateful that we are on this journey, and I'm very grateful to be part of this panel to talk to you guys through that. So that's a Toast journey, and that's our perspective on food waste. And I'm going to pass it off to Don.
Well, I did bring props, but I didn't have to check it on the plane. So I'm Dawn Rhodes. I am with Chick-fil-A. If you're familiar with Chick-fil-A, we are a nationwide restaurant company. We operate over 3,000 restaurants in the US, in Canada, as well as in Puerto Rico. And if you're a customer, which I hope you are, you probably associate us with delicious chicken. Our number one selling item is our chicken sandwich. It has 2 pickles and a buttered bun, my favorite. Perhaps your favorite might be your waffle fries or one of our fresh salads. And I hope you also associate with Chick-fil-A our wonderful, friendly team members that are very famous for saying "my pleasure" instead of "you're welcome" at the front counter. But you also might have another association with Chick-fil-A. Perhaps this drive-through is your association with Chick-fil-A. This is very common. We have very often double drive-throughs, a lot of cars often wrapped around the building. I do want to point out, side note, that despite the number of cars, we are award-winning in our speed of service for how quickly we are processing the drive-through. But my main reason for showing this picture today is really to illustrate what you might not understand about Chick-fil-A, is the size of our buildings. We operate in usually less than 5,000 square feet, so this is a pretty standard building footprint for us. Some of our inline locations might be multi-story, but so we're doing a high sales volume in a relatively small space. So that means that our kitchens are small, busy, space is a premium, and things that are going to help increase efficiency and reduce operational complexity, that's really important in our business. So we operate in these small, relatively small environments, but we have what I like to think is an outsized desire to have an impact. So we have a corporate goal that we want to divert 25 million pounds of food waste, restaurant food waste from landfill. We set this in 2020, and we're aiming to do this by the end of 2025. We are well on our way. As of today, we have diverted over 23 million pounds of food waste, restaurant food waste from landfill, which I think is really exciting. So we're really, really close. But this stems from a corporate purpose that really desires to be a good steward of everything entrusted to us, as well as to have a positive influence on everyone that comes in contact with Chick-fil-A, including the communities where we operate. So, this is restaurant food waste is one of the key areas that we feel like we can do that. We can be a good steward, we can have a positive influence on our communities. So I want to highlight several of the ways that we're doing this at the restaurant level. We do have, just for purposes today, I'm focusing on restaurant, but we do have programs where we are working on eliminating and diverting food waste upstream. So we are recent signatories to the U.S. Food Waste Pact, which we're very excited about, and we have aligned all of our food waste programs in accordance with the EPA waste reduction scale. I have to get used to the new terminology. So first and foremost, on the scale, first things first is source reduction. So we have a program that we have, it's a proprietary program. We've worked with a team of 6 Sigma black belts. We actually have them on staff, where we have a training portal, toolkits and resources really geared around developing a mindset of waste and eliminating waste of all forms. Specifically for us, the importance is around food waste. So this is something that we offer free, no cost to operators, and it's really a tool for them to create this mindset in their restaurants with team members, because team members are the ones who have the most day-to-day opportunity to eliminate waste. So they follow the training portal. There's tools and resources and activations that they can do to really internalize the principles and then apply it right in the moment to situations going on in their restaurant. So then moving along the scale, the next importance is food donation, or feeding hungry people. And this is a really meaningful way for Chick-fil-A. So we partner actually with Food Donation Connection, who is here in the audience today, to match up to nonprofits in our restaurant communities. We follow our own cool-down process and program for packaging up and donating. We are typically donating cooked product. Our most common ingredient is chicken of all forms, and then things like salads and soups, yogurt parfaits, possibly at the end of the night. And so our best partner is really with agencies that are cooking meals, so they can take an ingredient and create a meal out of this. And something I'm really excited about is a cookbook that we released third quarter last year called Second Helpings. And the goal really was to take food waste really to a higher level and to elevate success stories of how nonprofits are using our food, and then to inspire, and then also to just spark creativity as a resource for other nonprofits in ways that they can use the items that we are commonly donating. And then Back of House Organics is our program for, for composting and for diverting to industrial uses. So we have a program where we are diverting our food scraps from the kitchen. We do a systematic periodic waste characterizations, so we know that Back of House Organics is where our volume is. I like to joke that Chick-fil-A is so delicious that consumers are not wasting our food, they are eating it all. But every day, our team members are cooking and prepping large volumes of ingredients. So we're chopping salads, we're dealing with fresh berries. And so organics really, back of house, is where our opportunity to impact at scale really lies. So we do partner restaurants with compost haulers and where facilities exist. And then we have a separate program that we are also trying to scale for installing digestion equipment. So this would be a resource for restaurants that are not in locations that have commercial compost or anaerobic digestion hauling. Because one of the focus of today's panel was to kind of give a window into how restaurants are operationalizing food waste diversion, I wanted to share a couple key success factors that we've learned along the way around our food donation program and Back of House Organics. And the simplicity is key is shared among both of those. It's just so basic, but understanding that a restaurant is a small, tight space with a lot going on, we, as Chick-fil-A Inc., can't come in and create programs that are just going to add additional steps unless they're going to reduce that complexity or make things easier for the restaurant. And so for our Share Table program, one of the ways that has been the most beneficial of doing this is for our logging system. So we originally, when we started donating, we were logging into a third-party portal, and then restaurants would have to have a separate password and remember to do it every day. And that's great, we want the data, but we need it to be simple and streamlined and just part of the process that team members are used to doing. So along the way, we have incorporated it into our back of house system for inventory management. And so there's just a few buttons that they have to push, and it's just a very simple process for team members to do as they are packaging up that food and handing it over to volunteers. The side benefit to that is that it's actually tied into our recipes, so we have better and more accurate waste data of how it's actually costing the restaurant to create that waste, that surplus food. So for instance, with chicken, we are donating a number of pounds, but we also know from our recipe how much oil was used in the frying, how much coder, the milk and egg wash, and things like that. So that actually kind of ties into my second point around dispelling common myths. The most frequent thing that we hear from operators that are not yet donating their surplus food is that there's just this perception that by donating, you're creating a mindset where team members will cook to donate. They'll just get comfortable with it going to a good cause. And we don't see that happening. We know from data that over time, the amounts that are donated actually do decrease. And we think that's because this donation is really, it's a tool to help you focus on creating a mindset around waste. And then my third key success factor is really around leadership. Everyone has their cause, and we know that when leadership gets involved, it elevates the importance. But for us as a restaurant company, food donation and addressing food waste is so crucial to who we are. And we have seen a great momentum around just corporately the support for food donation when we transitioned to our current CEO, Andrew Cathy. He is a third generation Cathy member. We are privately held family-run business, and he has a personal commitment to addressing food insecurity. So he's actually on the food bank, the Atlantic Community Food Bank, on their board, and he has been very vocal over the past couple of years around the importance of Share Table in particular, and we've just seen the level of momentum and operator buy-in has increased dramatically, so we're grateful for that. And then transferring over to our composting, kind of back of the house, that simplicity is key, carries forward, and so this is where my props come in. We didn't want, when we were working to scale up our composting program, we didn't want to create confusion or have something that's just an additional step. And originally, we were using Slim Jims and roll carts in a variety of different containers. And then we quickly realized that we already had the easiest thing to incorporate into our process. Our pickles come in, we call it a pickle bucket. It happens to be the right color. And the size is great. It can fit under our sinks. It can fit right next to all of the food prep areas. And so it really was just something that was already on hand, and it was just simple and easy for team members to toss in and then carry it by the handle. So really just making that realization that we already had what we needed, so keep it simple. And then I think I'm getting really close on time, but visual aids are really important. We use pictures instead of words for all of our signs. And then really educating and doing compost tours with operators has been really instrumental in creating buy-in for adding additional program in their restaurants. So, and here, I just wanted to direct everyone to, the name of our cookbook is extrahelpings.com is where you can see it. I'd encourage you to just give it a look. Really, the idea behind creating it was to inspire and really just be part of, it's a collaborative effort in addressing food waste and changing the mindset. So this was a way that we felt really, that was a great spot for us to fill. So I will pass it to Michael.
Awesome. Thank you, Dawn. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike. I am coming from Thunderbolt in Los Angeles. Do we have any operators in the room? Anyone operating? Okay, this is going to be totally different than what we just went through. So I operate a little neighborhood cocktail bar in LA called Thunderbolt. So it feels a little crazy to be up here speaking next to folks with such a large impact when we're just kind of holding our ground in our little corner of Echo Park in LA. But we're doing some pretty cool things in our very little niche world of the cocktail industry. So this is going to be more of a beverage-focused talk on how we're reducing waste, because we are very much a bar restaurant. We're about 85% beverage sales, 15% food sales. So we're doing some pretty cool things in the space of sustainability, and low waste, which are huge, buzzy topics in my little niche world of cocktail bars right now. So Thunderbolt, we set out with a few goals when we opened in 2019, which was, really excellent timing, 6 months to the day before COVID shut down. But sort of if we're looking at a silver lining of what COVID did, it taught us a lot, and it helped us really refine what we were doing even more. So those tenets were really, we want to be a neighborhood bar. We want to remove some of the pretentiousness from the cocktail bar world. We want to have really, really great tasting drinks. We want those drinks to come out really, really fast, and we want our staff to make a lot of money because those drinks come out really, really fast. So I'm telling you all this because we set out not with a goal of being hyper-sustainable, but we set out with a goal of being hyper-efficient and delicious. So previous to opening Thunderbolt, I spent about 5 years as a brand ambassador for a big liquor brand, and my job was to go around to bars and educate on my products. So I averaged about 125 bars a month for 4.5 years. Luckily, I worked for Capoferri. It was like a very low alcohol product, so I wasn't out there drinking 125 margaritas a month. But sort of what came out of that was I got to see what everyone was doing in our industry. I got to learn a ton about the technology being used, sort of like the very, very cutting edge of how cocktails were being made and how bars were operating and what those economics looked like. And we got to spend a ton of time sort of rolling that into how we operate Thunderbolt. So we use some really unique technology. We built our bar around those technologies. I'm going to try to keep this as not nerdy as possible because I am used to giving this talk to bartenders and we get like extremely technical on the freezing point of alcohol. If anyone wants to talk about that with me after, I will stick around and I will go so far down that rabbit hole with you if you are into it. Okay, so I don't have a ton of slides for you because I didn't want to put like graphs and charts on here, but we really operate the sustainable elements of our restaurant and bar from really 3 factors. And this is a trend that's happening, and I was talking to a prominent brand owner, a gin brand owner yesterday. the way cocktail bars are going, at least what I can see, is that 95% of the work in making cocktails is happening with the prep team now. Sort of the bars that are winning awards, the bars that are pushing boundaries on how drinks are made and how delicious drinks can be, rely heavily on, like, many of these bars have a laboratory where most of the beverages are being made, and we hire bartenders that put that last 5% of effort into the drink and are the ones delivering the hospitality and the experience and are like the show people. So we are one of those bars. We have 48 hours of prep a week that make our whole menu executable in a matter of seconds. So if you order a drink from one of our bartenders, even if we're busy, it takes a matter of seconds to produce, perfect temperature every time, perfect dilution every time, tastes exactly the same every time. And we do that with a few different techniques. So one of which is temperature control. That's the really nerdy part, and I'll go into it. The second is non-traditional drink production. That means we are not really shaking or stirring any of our drinks. Does anyone spend time at cocktail bars? Anybody a cocktail fan? Okay, great. So even if you haven't worked in it, you've seen that typically a cocktail is going to be shaken with ice or stirred with ice when you order it, and it takes some amount of time, and there's a certain amount of water waste that comes along with that. So we are sort of usurping those methods and going about it differently, and I will get into that. And then the last one is really minimalist serves. We're operating with very simple glassware, no garnishes, nothing superfluous, nothing that would create waste, nothing that requires us to order anything else. So this all started from a cost savings perspective and also this is another talk, but a staff retention perspective. We're able to put out a ton of drinks with a minimal amount of bartenders, so our staff makes a ton of money. Labor is, my bar's in California, labor is wildly expensive. It is vastly more important than our food cost or our beverage cost. It's all about labor. Our profitability hinges on it. So we're able to produce a lot more beverage with a lot fewer people. I haven't hired a bartender in like 2.5 years, which anyone who's ever worked in operations knows that's a crazy long shelf life for a bartender. Because we just have no turnover. Okay, so our big thing is temperature control. So what do I mean by that? We have a 19 cocktail menu. We do not shake or stir one cocktail in a traditional method. We're not like a stuffy, buttoned-up bar. We're extremely casual. We don't want an alienating experience. All of that magic happens behind the scenes. You would only recognize it if you had been a bartender, but almost everything we do is done in advance. So the benefit of that is we don't have to have fancy cube or ice machines that waste a ton of water. Again, we're in California. Water waste is the biggest element here. So I didn't know we were just always in a drought. I've been in California like 14 years. It started raining about 2 years ago, and I was like, oh, we've been in a drought for 20 years. So we don't waste any water on our menu. We are a neighborhood bar. We still make traditional cocktails, but we do, even our traditional cocktail orders are non-menu drinks that we couldn't possibly prepare for in advance because we don't know what people are going to order. We do in a different way that wastes no water. So we have no big expensive cube ice machine like most bars have that are super wasteful. We don't have to melt our ice at the end of the night. Every cocktail we make is perfectly diluted so that we're not dumping out a tin of ice into the sink every time. So we're probably the lowest water waste bar that I've ever seen. Maybe someone out there is doing it that I haven't met yet, but I try to stay on top of these things and travel around, and that's kind of what I do. So this is going to be the nerdiest part, and I'm going to make it really quick. The higher alcohol your beverage goes, the lower the freezing point goes. Okay, that's why you can put a bottle of vodka in your freezer and it doesn't turn into vodka ice, right? So the world of refrigeration in a commercial environment is basically two temperatures. You have a refrigerator at about 34 degrees Fahrenheit, and you have a freezer between -5 and 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Cocktails live in the middle. Cocktails are always in between a refrigerator and a freezer. So our whole bar program hinges on that middle ground temperature. So we have custom refrigeration that lives in that realm. So I can have a cocktail perfectly diluted and at its temperature, measuring the water by weight, or using what we call dilution substitution, something totally different than water, to dilute that cocktail to its perfect strength. I put it in a refrigerator that gets it to its perfect temperature. We've wasted no water. We can make that drink in 2 seconds by just pouring it, not having to stir or shake it. With me? Okay, that's the nerdy part. Okay, so we're either not using water for dilution. We have a martini on our menu that I'll show in a second where all the dilution is clarified tomato water that we we take like ugly tomatoes, we blend them, we clarify that in a centrifuge, we use that liquid as the dilution. It's this very umami, savory martini. Come to LA, I'll pour you one. It'll be really fast. So things like that. So if we are using water, it's exact, it's measured. Again, that results in a hyper-fast drink serve, which means higher sales, which means happier bartenders, happier servers. They're making more tips with fewer people. Great. Okay, so that's the temperature thing. Minimalism. So the other thing is, we started a little more maximalist, but as we sort of fine-tuned this thing, and COVID sort of helped us with this because we were innovating every day because we were able to sell to-go cocktails, which is how we stayed alive during COVID. We just kept reducing anything superfluous. So we don't garnish anything. So that's the martini I was talking about. It looks very simple. It's just a clear cocktail. I'll go into what I'm doing with that sprayer in a second. But nothing superfluous. We took no garnishes to essentially dial back to no citrus, which is probably the biggest waste product of a traditional cocktail bar. So we do buy some citrus because we are a neighborhood bar and we're near Dodger Stadium, and if you're coming in and you want a vodka soda and you want a lime on it, I'm not going to tell you no. But we are not juicing the massive amount of lemon and lime juice that most bars are. We are sort of getting around citrus in various ways. We buy citrus from a commercial juice producer on a very small scale. We will use that in traditional cocktails, although only 2 of our cocktails have fresh citrus juice in them. Most bars throw away their citrus after 48 hours because it's not fresh anymore. We've sort of developed a technique of taking our citrus that is past its freshness point where we would use it in a margarita. We spin that clear in a centrifuge, we pasteurize it, we bring the sugar up, and we have a shelf-stable cordial that we can then use in other styles of cocktails, so there's no waste. We also don't buy citrus for peeled garnishes. If anyone's ever had an old-fashioned before, they put the orange peel on top. We use pure essential oil of citrus that's a byproduct of the juice industry that would otherwise be thrown away. We use pure alcohol, and we make that into a spray. That's what I'm doing right there, is spraying lemon oil on top of our martini. We don't have to peel and waste any fruit. We use combinations of powdered acids to replace citrus juice in many of our cocktails where we don't need the flavor of lemon or lime. We'll sort of make an analog of that acidity and add that in, so there's no waste there. There's a variety of things we're doing that are just, you probably would never notice as a consumer, but it's keeping our costs down. We throw away no citrus. We order a tiny amount of citrus, which is like a huge economical boon as well because limes have been insane. I don't know if anyone's followed the lime market over the past decade. It's been a wild ride. It's a real roller coaster. Okay, with me so far. I think that might be my last one, but I'm going to keep talking. So the other thing we do is when we shake and stir cocktails, we're not doing it in a traditional way. If you order a margarita from us, we're going to shake it with a tiny amount of crushed ice instead of these big cubes. We have this big sort of plastic block we use to mimic the texture of shaking with big cubes, so we're not dumping any ice at the end of the drink, what have you. So, yeah, water waste, no citrus, no garnishes, fast drinks, happy bartenders. Back to Jeff.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists, and I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning. I think there's some great expertise here, and we're super excited to have them to answer some questions. So one of the things I really kind of noticed that might be really relevant to the audience, people trying to get messaging, and you talk to restaurateurs, how to reduce their food waste, everything else, is making sure the idea you're presenting to them is easy to understand, easy to adopt, and easy to implement. So some examples from Annie is like the toast tracking part of the toast.org, and food waste is right next to the actual point of sale system. And for Dawn, it's instead of coming up with a new mental model and using an outside resource for software, it's an in-house model with the same password and using the bucket of pickle bucket instead of a whole different thing that they have to try and do. So looking at the audience, any advice to our members, any sort of creative ways of like how to sort of shape these ideas or things that you've done personally to kind of craft these ideas to get into the minds and influence really, really busy, crazy restaurateurs who might want to do this?
Yeah, I can go first. And I also acknowledge that we at Toast have this pretty incredible platform of 112,000 restaurants. And even with 112,000 restaurants, it's still hard to get a hold of them. So I think that's one of the most important things. But the way we've approached this work is, of course, we're here as a unit, as practitioners, talking about food waste and reducing methane gas and CO2, and there's all these math and calculations. I do not ever utter those words to a restaurant operator. My first thing is cost, savings, recoup revenue, and it just so happens that if you do that, the byproduct of that on my side is that you're reducing waste and methane. And so it's really important when you're speaking to your audience, especially restaurant operators, as Jeff just mentioned, very busy folks, profit margins are at less than 5%. You have to speak their language, and if it doesn't make economical sense, as the head of agriculture, I forgot their person who spoke earlier, said, if you don't have an economic opportunity or you're framing it that way, you're unfortunately going to lose the audience. And some people are well-intentioned and they're environmentally minded, but running a business is running a business. And so speaking to folks in that manner, I've found very, very helpful.
Agree with what you said. I think I would add that from our perspective, also speak the language and then understand the environment and the size of the environment. So, understanding that we've got restaurants are just tight spaces. So, practical example is, one of our struggles has been with on-site diversion equipment. It's great. It makes it easy, but it's not a solution for a lot of our locations just because we physically don't have the space for it. So just understanding, the smaller the better. It's a tight environment.
I'm gonna borrow yours. I think as an operator of a very small independent restaurant, things have to be pretty turnkey for us. And when I think about this Toast, this food waste management, it's like I have to understand, I have to be pitched on how much time is it going to take someone I'm paying $25 an hour to input that data, where are the economics coming out, and that only scales up with an operation with 3,000 locations. But even at my one tiny little restaurant, implementing something like that, at the end of the day, still has to make economical sense. So.
I think we've done that for you, Mike.
We have a meeting after this already set up. He's pitching me
Mike
after
is soon to be a Toast PO at a couple of your locations, which I'll also just disclose that I was at Thunderbolt 2 months ago without even realizing, and I came out of that being like, oh my God, this is an incredible bar. I did have to leave my neighborhood, which is 10 miles away. It took me an hour and a half, but I would do it again in that LA traffic for you, Mike. It was incredible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. LA traffic for you. So I want to open it up to the audience as well. If you have a question, please go to the mic here in the middle. And then if we have any air gaps, I know there's some questions that the members would like to ask each other up here too. So go ahead and please introduce yourself, who you're with, and then your question.
Jeff Rochester, I run a consulting practice. Just a question, particularly for Ani and for Dawn. Implicit in this conversation of waste is portion control. But I don't hear of any specific initiatives around portion control. And by the way, that's a climate benefit, it's a health benefit. So could you guys talk about where is portion control in this conversation?
You go first.
I can start it. I would say for us, portion control is not as much a part of our conversation. I think we're fairly right-sized, if I'm being honest. But we know that because we don't see front-of-house food waste. Like, literally, there's, maybe a waffle fry crumb. So for us, that's not really part of a conversation. I do think it is happening more at sit-down restaurant level. So I think it is happening maybe behind the scenes that, you just might not have heard about.
Yeah, and I think so as part of that research we started 2 years ago, one of the biggest things we identified was plate waste. And I'll go back to this portion of this journey we're on where we trying to identify implicit places where we had a permission to participate and where we could have material impact. The first one that came out was just the tracking and managing. We are very well aware of the food and plate sizing, and we're thinking about how we can participate in that without, rubbing our operators the wrong way. And one thing that we've often thought about, which might be a little bit down the line, is this idea of this dynamic sizing. And when you're ordering from your menu, you can have a small, medium, large that's embedded into the menu ordering for a guest. But we need to do our homework to understand how to thread that needle between that relationship between the guest and the restaurant operator, so it doesn't feel like we're overbearing and kind of positioning our mindset or views in this very draconian, if that's the right word, generalist way. So yeah, very mindful of it, but baby steps. If you ask me that question again in 2 years, I think I'll have a better answer.
And very quickly, just from perspective of the National Restaurant Association working with hundreds of different brands, a lot of it does depend on the brand. And at the National Restaurant Association show many years ago, I did a panel with Rick Bayless, who's a celebrity restaurateur, and he was asked a similar question. And his response was, yeah, it's important, but being festive and celebrating and having larger portions is a huge driver of not only restaurant profit, but also cultural aspects of why people go to restaurants. So while I think portions definitely play a role, we do have to be mindful that celebration and having a little largesse thrown in is a huge part of not only why restaurants exist, but also why people go to them and part of our culture as well. So just be mindful when talking to restaurant owners about that.
Hi. Thank you all for your presentations today and your efforts. My name is Alana Goldstein. I work at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and it's a question primarily for Dawn, but I think others could probably answer as well. Some restaurants we go into as consumers promote or even share with their customers the sustainability efforts or other efforts they're doing, and I was curious what outreach, if any, you all have done to your customers and what reception you've gotten from that, just given the specific customer base you have versus, let's say, someone who's going to Mike's restaurant. And I say this, I'm a vegetarian, so I have not been to one of your restaurants, so that's why I was curious.
We do have salads and waffle fries. Historically, Chick-fil-A has not led with a sustainability message, customer facing. We are starting that and being very mindful of our message, but we just as a brand are very community driven in our messaging. And so that has been kind of first and foremost. So, but I will say that we have started, we have a couple different channels, communication channels where we have featured stories of the community impact that our sustainability efforts are having. And so I think it's kind of the marriage of that, and it is very well received. I will say that we do have operators, particularly in more Western or West Coast markets, that are requesting additional resources around customer-facing sustainability materials. So it is a work in progress, but we're just being very mindful of how we do it in the right tone of voice for our brand. But great question.
Yeah, and I can quickly just speak to what we're seeing from Toast. So Toast services a wide range. The Mikes of the world, 1 to 5 plus locations, 5 to 10, 50 plus, hundreds of locations. And in the last year, I started noticing more and more of them are independently, on the larger side, the mid-market and enterprise, starting to release their ESG reports and asking for data from us, Toast, and we're like, what? but it's happening more and more. So hopefully that culture starts increasing, even maybe down market, and maybe it might be a flyer or two from a mom and pop saying, hey, this is what we did last year, and so on and so forth.
Hello, my name is Mark Talbot. I'm with Trenton Renewables. We operate an anaerobic digester in Trenton, New Jersey. So for Dawn, at the stores where you implemented the collection of food waste, were you seeing like cost increase, cost neutral, or cost reduction as a part of the waste management recycling program?
So first of all, we've got to start sharing the love with the questions, okay? But yes, so I don't have a hard and fast black and white answer to this. It does vary depending on the sales volume of the restaurant and what their existing trash charges are. So we've seen kind of a variety. Some locations are able to offset costs because they're not having a dumpster tilt, or perhaps they were facing overage charges, and then by diverting organics, they have eliminated that extra charge. So it really kind of depends. I will say though, in general, it is proving to be a little bit of an extra cost, just given the way things average out. But it also has kind of side benefits that are hard to quantify around labor savings and ease of simplification around removing trash.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just wanted to echo the gratitude for this session, this panel. It's been really, really enlightening. Lise Pellegrino with the Center for Ecotechnology. I have been a waste reduction consultant, and being in kitchens and firsthand having these conversations, especially hearing anecdotally, there are certain large corporate chains that mandate disposal at the end of the night. And so I feel like this is the group to crack the code and solve this kind of puzzle that I'll describe as essentially solving for overproduction concerns. Dawn, I think you had mentioned it, right? You were like, they're worried about that, but we haven't seen that. But that is still, let alone, a very much the reason why, a lot of GMs and owners will not, have a share shelf for their employees, right? And I just think this is what an incredible opportunity to tie into staff retention, which I know all GMs and anybody in the restaurant industry is really struggling with. So it's why wouldn't that be tied together more? How do we solve for overproduction concerns?
Well, I think part of it is just being vocal about it and dispelling myths. I mean, that's where data comes in, and so the importance of really having good data. And I'll be honest, we have good data around donation. We are working towards getting better data around overall our waste segments. But I think just being proactive we communicate periodically with our restaurant markets. And so being proactive about dispelling those myths, I think, is really crucial, and having the data to back it up.
So, Mike, do you want to take this one? Maybe next. I got you. So I actually have an interesting perspective on overproduction. And so at Toast, we have a lot of bread puns. We call ourselves toasters. So I'll lead in with this one. Overproduction is baked into, from what we know and see for restaurant, overproduction is baked into restaurants' inventory. We have unfortunately been conditioned to, and then people know this, that the fuller the shelf, the better. And so restaurant operators follow that same model. So that's why when you go into bakery, you're like, it's 5 p.m., you're closing in 2 hours. How is this shelf still full? And so our perspective on that is, again, we as a culture need to figure out this whole idea that more is better. But until we do that, we need to give restaurants, in our perspective, an option to figure out how to divert this overproduction, because we know for a fact at the end of the day you're going to have that excess. So it's a matter of what can we help you do with it to divert it. And so that's how we're thinking about the next wave of this, our initiatives. It's overproduction is baked into your stuff, so let's help you divert that, knowing that in the next hour or two you're going to close and you're going to throw this away either via donations or surplus sales or composting. And it's not the way I want the world to work. And I really appreciate your question, but I'm also acknowledging that's a mental mindset as consumers that we're dealing with right now. But I don't know.
It's more just about ensuring it goes to the staff. That's kind of my point. I've heard GMs, Vic, I don't want to give this food to the staff, because then I've heard a story yesterday that there were then staff selling the food on the side, right? And so I'm like, can't we account though, figure out a way to just make sure that the staff are taken care of? You brought up a great point about a livable wage, right? That's why you don't have a staff retention problem, right?
No, and I live in this tiny niche world where it would be insane to throw a piece of food away and not offer it to the staff. And I don't care if they go sell it, but I understand that at an enterprise level with thousands of locations, it's hard to convince everyone to do that. But I'm with you. That seems crazy. Yeah.
Last question. We don't want to keep people from lunch, so.
Ooh, pressure's
Pressure's on. I am Heather Thompson. I'm the executive director of Table to Table in New Jersey. So we are a food rescue nonprofit. And so that diversion of surplus food to get it to communities in need is exactly what we do. My question is, we've been working on sort of industries that we're having some challenges sort of penetrating and getting this message across of that, yes, you can safely and effectively reduce your food waste and donate the surplus food. And one of those industries is banquets and events and restaurants that do large-scale events. I don't know about other places, but in New Jersey, bounty is everything. It's a 200-person event, and there's enough cheese out for 600 people. So I'm curious, in the work you've been doing, and perhaps, Jeff, you can even chime in on this, have you worked with any restaurants or event producers in this way, and are the barriers seemingly the same? Or is there anything you've seen that's different in that particular space?
Yeah, I can go if you want to jump in. So, like I mentioned, Toast is an all-in-one. We have a lot and everything. Even for me, I've been there for 7 years, and the number of products that we have is still just overwhelming. We have a catering product that we launched a couple years ago, and we acknowledge that by entering into that space, we are further propagating this New Jersey bountiness. So sorry about that. But we also acknowledge that there should be an opportunity for us to find ways to reduce our impact and leave the space better than what we find it. So we've been exploring with partners about how to make that connection when a guest is making that catering order. Is there a signal where we point them and said, hey, we know you're going to have this excess food. Here are a couple food recovery agencies that can come to your wedding, or something along those lines, whatever your participation. So we're exploring how to again, I keep on saying this, like implicit permission to participate. We're looking for ways to balance that with catering and large events, especially as more and more of these larger locations do these massive catering orders. So, yeah.
So time's up. Just to thank you, everyone, for being part of the panel. We appreciate your insights. And sorry for everyone who didn't get their questions answered, but you're welcome to come up and ask here to anyone on the panel, and we can see everybody at lunch. So thank you.